Hello again and welcome to the Llama Podcast. I'm Peter Bowes, and Llama Live Long and Master Aging is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. Now imagine adopting a fasting regime to lose weight. You shed more than 80 pounds and then decide to continue fasting because it feels so good. Not just being lighter, but the process of fasting, going without food, sometimes for several days, feels so stunningly good, you decide to keep fasting indefinitely. Well, Phil Libin is doing just that. Phil is the CEO of All Turtles, which is his new venture, an artificial intelligence startup studio. Phil, of course, is better known, for the time being at least, as the co-founder of Evernote, the productivity app, sometimes called your external brain, cloud-based data storage that is hugely popular around the world. Now, fasting for weight loss and long-term health is a topic we've discussed here a number of times, starting with the 5-day so-called fasting mimicking diet that I've tried myself. You can listen to episode 1 of my conversation with Dr. Walter Longo to hear more about that. Some people do 36-hour fasts, 72 hours, or even longer. And of course, there's the 5-2 diet that's become popular, especially in the UK. Well, Phil Libin's experience errs on the extreme side, and as he says himself, he does nothing by halves. I hope you enjoy our conversation. We met at Phil's new office in San Francisco. Phil Libin, welcome to the Llama Podcast.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Great to see you. Are you fasting today?
I am not fasting today. In fact, this whole week has kind of been a heavy food week. I've got way too many important social eating things, but I'm really looking forward to next week. I think I can get a few good days of fasting in next week.
So as I mentioned, we're in your new office. You've just been here for a few weeks. This is All Turtles.
All Turtles.
Tell me about this.
Well, we're an AI startup studio. We're in San Francisco, Tokyo, and Paris, and we're basically a new way for people to build AI products without having to go through all of the rigmarole of worrying about setting up little companies and startups. Just focus on making the products first.
And of course, I mentioned Evernote. You've moved on from Evernote, but it's still a huge part of your life. I don't want to talk too much about it because we've got a lot of fasting discussion, but Evernote, how did it change your life?
Well, we really just try to make something for ourselves at Evernote. We wanted to make a product that we would love, that we would use. We wanted to be smarter, better organized. I'm generally a pretty disorganized person, so I kind of wanted to make something to get my life together, and it worked really well. It was a super good team that I'm proud to have been a part of for almost a decade. Tried to make a company that would be important to a few 100 million people, and hopefully we've at least done that.
And of course, you still use it right now?
Oh, I use it daily. Yeah, I live in it.
And me too. I mean, I'm reading from it now. It has become a huge central part to my life, and I think it's absolutely a great product. So
thank you.
Love that. But I'm interested in your life while you were at Evernote. That's when you became famous. That's when people will, famous to a certain audience, shall we say that, and people will have read about you, they'll have seen your photograph, and you had a certain image. You were a larger guy, you had a beard then,
exactly.
And I'm curious, did you at that stage, and we're going back a few years, did you care about your health?
I cared, I just didn't really do much about it. I basically told myself very early on, I kind of made this really bad idea rule where I said, you know what, I'm not going to worry about any of this until I'm 45. But as soon as I turn 45, I'm going to take my health really seriously. And I probably decided this when I was 20. And honestly, in the back of my head, I'm 45, I'm never going to live that long. So I just thought this was a good way to avoid all responsibility. And so, yeah, I was fat. In fact, clinically, I was obese. My BMI was, I think, above 35 at one point. And I always kind of said, yeah, when I'm 45, I'll figure it out. I had tried several times to lose weight, and I had lost weight several times. I'd done a few different things where I'd drop, 20, 30 pounds on whatever diet, because you can do that with anything. But then it would always come back within 3 months. And I was unhealthy and fairly unhappy about it, but not really doing much.
Do you regret, that indicates that you do regret it. You regret having that attitude as a younger man?
No, it worked out great because, I turned 45, I took care of it.
So it worked for you.
Yeah, plan, love it when a plan comes together.
But if you had your time again, would you take more notice of your health?
Yeah, had I known about fasting, I would have just been doing that all along because it's so awesome. There's no reason not to do it. So, yeah. It never even occurred to me, though, that was a thing. So I was just doing all of the traditional things that you're supposed to do,
crash
low-fat diet and exercise and all that stuff, which doesn't do anything for weight loss. And yeah, I mean, I just wish that I hadn't read about all of the nonsense that you're supposed to be doing and not done any of that, and instead done the thing that's actually easy and seems to work pretty well.
So what happened to get you into fasting?
I was having coffee about 7-8 months ago. So, I was about to turn 45 and I was about to start a new company. And I said, okay, well, now I have to take this seriously because I've been telling myself this for 25 years. So if I don't actually take it seriously, I'll never be able to believe myself again. And I wanted to kind of get in shape finally before I can start a company. I wanted to prove that I can govern myself before I undertook the task of actually running a company again. So I started, dieting and exercising, and that wasn't really going anywhere because it never does. But, I kept at it for a bit. And I had coffee with a friend of mine, Loic Lemire, who is actually the CEO of one of our studio companies here of Leaders. And Loic is always he's on the cutting edge of the zeitgeist. He hears about all the new stuff. So he's the guy that got all of San Francisco into meditation a few years ago, back when that was legally required. And he said, oh, I haven't eaten for 3 days. I'm fasting. And I'm like, what? You doing what? And he said, yeah, there's this thing, you fast. And he told me about, I forget where he heard it from, but it's got all these benefits and you just don't eat. And I remember thinking that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's obviously terrible for you. You're just I can't imagine you're doing this.
And which is probably what most doctors would say to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I went home and I Googled it and I was reading about it entirely with the intention of just proving to Loic what an idiot he was being. So I just read a bunch of the literature, thinking I would see him the next day and be look, this and this and this and this, you're just wrong. Go eat a sandwich. But as I started reading about it, I read a bunch of the new science, and including Dr. Longo's stuff and a few other things, and I was like, wow, this is actually plausible. This kind of makes sense to me. And so I thought, well, let's try it. Let's just to see what it feels like. Because if Loic can do it, maybe I can do it. So I tried just not eating for 3 days. And
you did it cold turkey.
Cold turkey, yeah. I like doing things if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to half-ass it. So the first day I was oh my God, I'm going to die. All I can think about is food. And then the second day I'm oh my God, I'm going to die. All I can think about is food. And I woke up in the morning of the third day. I'm I feel amazing. This is better than I've ever felt. I feel clear. I feel happy. I'm not hungry. Day 3 felt amazing. But I was still just very anxious to eat something. So, I ate at dinner of day 3 and I'm that was actually not nearly as bad as I thought and actually felt pretty good at the end.
And this is a complete fast. It's water only.
Water and no calories. So I was drinking black coffee
right.
and tea without anything in it. Yeah, and water. And then I just started reading a ton more about it and doing more and more of it and doing different versions and different techniques. And that was about 8 months ago. And it's been amazing.
And so you did it for 3 days to start with.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you leave it before you repeated it?
I think the next week I was doing I started doing the only eat within an 8-hour window, the intermittent fasting stuff. And then I went another day. And then probably 3 weeks later, I did another 3-day one. And yeah, and I did all sorts of different trials while reading about it, talking to people, looking at the research. Measuring myself, I started getting all sorts of quantified self stuff.
But you were generally you were kind of making it up as you went along, maybe a 3-day or a 5-day or an 8-day with a little bit of 16-8 in between times, just to see what felt right for you.
Yeah, just to see what felt, just out of interest to see what felt good. The effects were really strong. I mean, but I didn't expect to stick with it. But, I was losing weight because, you don't eat, you lose a lot of weight. It's just how it works. So I was definitely losing weight and I felt great.
How fast did the weight come off?
Fast. I mean, I'm down 86 pounds, I think, in whatever it's been, 7-8 months. It's pretty fast. I was losing a few pounds every week and, gaining some of it back when I ate, but then never gained back as much as I'd lost. And then I thought everyone was saying, oh, but you're losing all this muscle. It's not really fat. You're burning muscle. And I thought, well, that doesn't really make any sense. Why would your body burn muscle when there's fat? Isn't that what fat's there for? I didn't understand the metabolic pathway that would cause you to burn muscle or bone or whatever people say. So I started doing DEXA fit scanning just to see. I mean, luckily, I'm in San Francisco, so any questions you have, you can answer.
And also seemingly a little crazy in San Francisco, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Everyone's doing something weird, so it's easy. So you have a big dinner and you don't eat. No one thinks twice. So yeah, I just did that, and so far I'm not an expert, but the effects on me have been really dramatic and positive. And at this point, I'm fasting not so much to lose weight. I'm at the weight I want to be. I'm just doing it because I really like it. It just feels great. So
Just explain a bit more about that, because I know what you're talking about, because I've experienced that kind of mental euphoria, that mental agility that you get after a couple of days. And I think ketosis is a big part of that, when you start burning fat for energy as opposed to glucose. But describe the feeling.
well, there's several things there's several feelings that happen. One is, I would say, there's a feeling that I would characterize as almost like a light euphoria, like a mild euphoria. It's like sustained. The closest I'd come to it is, I remember this really interesting experience. So a few years ago, probably like 5 years ago, I had this surgery. It was minor, but they couldn't put me under completely because they needed to be awake, because I had to like do some stuff while they were doing stuff. And so they gave me some local anesthetic, and then they gave me some like, industrial strength painkiller. I don't even know what it was, but it was like my first time taking like some like heavy duty opioid, like professional painkiller. And I remember like lying on the operating table, like under this painkiller with like doctors like probing me. And it was just an exploratory thing. And it turns out they didn't find anything. So everything was great, but it could have been a serious thing. So I remember like lying on the table, like under painkiller with like doctors like rooting around, inside of me, which maybe they find something really bad. And it was, in some ways it could have been like a really bad day for me. But I just remember thinking like, oh my God, I have never been happier. Like, this is the best day of my life. I feel amazing. And I remember telling the doctor, like in the operating room, like, doctor, like, I feel great. Like, whatever this thing is you gave me, like, I've never been happier. This is amazing. And he was like, yeah, don't get used to it. You're never getting this again. And I genuinely felt euphoric and happy, even though I knew, like I was lucid. I knew what was going on. I knew it was just a painkiller that was doing it, but I felt amazing. And I never had that experience again because I never took it again. But I remember thinking, wow, that's all it takes. Like, I can see why people like this. And fasting, when you're on day 2, day 3, day 4, day 7, like I get a mild version of that. It's like a mild version of like, I'm just pretty happy and like pretty clear and everything's okay with the world. And even though like all the same bad stuff that's always happening is happening, like it just kind of seems okay. Yeah, it's that at like 2% of what it was like, being on an opioid, but hopefully better for you and more sustainable.
And do you feel that your work is better, that you can sustain mental agility for a longer period of time, that you get more done?
I definitely feel that way. I haven't tested that. I've done a lot of the physical quantified testing. I haven't done like the cognitive testing just because I'm not really sure how to do that. And a lot of the ways that people do it seem like bullshit to me. So I couldn't tell you for sure that I'm more productive or more focused, but it definitely feels that way.
And did you talk to your doctor first before you started any of this?
No, but I talked to my doctor while I was doing it, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's terrible. You have to eat 7 meals a day. It's really bad for you. You should stop doing it." And I'm like, "Okay, it's just a random thing that you just said that you heard somewhere. Show me, explain to me what's wrong with it and show me the results that are bad." And he couldn't. We did the blood test. We did a full battery test, and he looked at it and he's like, wow, all of this stuff, like he compared it to what I was 3 years ago, because I did like a full battery of like super detailed stuff 3 years ago just to like get it all. I did Wellness FX, like the full like pro athlete level, just because I wanted all the data, and I showed it to him, and he was like, yeah, on all of the major stuff, you're like 20 years younger. I still think it's a bad idea, but I can't point to the places of like, I can't point to a result and say this is going in the wrong direction.
But could he quantify why he thought it was bad? What about it could harm you?
Well, so it was all the stuff that you read about, how it's like, you're going to be burning muscle and your body starts to eat itself. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like, that's kind of what you want. And that's what it's supposed to do. And honestly, I just think like when I challenged it, I think he's a super smart guy, obviously, much smarter than I am on healthcare and medicine stuff. And I think when I pushed back, he kind of realized that, well, it's just received wisdom. And so he said, okay, look, just like be careful, like come in more, make sure you get enough to drink, which is all like solid advice. But he hasn't tried to discourage me because he said, look, it looks like this is working for you. So the data are the data. But the inclination was you shouldn't do this.
And just to talk in more detail about the body eating itself idea, this is autophagy that you're essentially talking about, which you could phrase it a different way and say the body is rebuilding itself. Dead and dying and useless cells are being thrown out and then you grow new ones.
Your body's doing the thing that it evolved to do. Yeah, exactly. Fat is there for a reason. Well, I shouldn't say reason, but we put on fat so that we can use it. Like as long as you're fat, you've got energy. This was like, when I decided to start it, I had basically 2 realizations that made it okay for me to start. Like, this is how I justified it in my head. I said, first thing is fat people don't starve to death. Like, if you're going to starve to death, you need to be really, really, really skinny. Like you see pictures of people that are literally starving and they don't look like you or me. They don't look like, the people that we interact with. Like they're very visibly, emaciated and skinny. So you don't see like fat people starving to death. You can't do it. That doesn't mean you're not going to die of other things, but like literally if you have fat, you have energy. So I kind of realized that like I've got all this fat, I can use it. I'm not going to literally starve. And then the second thing was that the feeling of hunger, and I knew this already, I knew it, but I didn't realize it. I didn't grok it, was that the feeling of hunger isn't cumulative. Like it doesn't build up. It's not like, oh my God, it's been 4 hours since I've eaten and I'm starving, which means that if I don't eat for another 40 hours, I'm going to be 10 times more starving. I'm like, no, you're not. In 20 minutes, you're not going to be hungry again.
It goes in waves.
It's all waves and it doesn't build up and it doesn't accumulate. And so once you like ride it out, it's fine. And so when I realized like fat people don't starve to death and hunger doesn't build up, or at least the feeling of hunger doesn't build up. I'm sure it does once you're actually starving, but that's going to take a long time. Yeah. Right. Literally, like I would have to not eat for like 9 months to get to that level. Then it made it okay to try. I'm like, this isn't actually hurting me. So, and it's only unpleasant in waves. So let's do it. Let's try it. And then it turned out it got to being, I would say, right from the beginning, it was really pleasant. But the first few times it was both pleasant and unpleasant. But then in a short period of time, all the unpleasantness went away and it was just pleasant. So like right now it's just like all positive, no negative. In the beginning, it was like both positive and negative.
And I think we should say, just after this discussion about your doctor and the conversations that you had with him, we should say that if anyone is considering this, the best advice is to speak to your doctor and to take medical advice, because fasting isn't necessarily good for everyone and it could be dangerous.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely not giving people advice about this. Like I am not an expert. I don't know what I'm talking about. I can talk about my own subjective experience, and that's it.
And me too. I'm not the expert, but we, certainly in this podcast, reflect what people are doing and new ideas that to a huge number of people, and maybe we're getting into the social aspects again here, seem incredibly extreme, that you should be doing something like this.
It does. It seems nuts, but it isn't. And I kind of liken it to, I'm completely physically uncoordinated. I'm terrible at all sports. I was born without the gene that makes you care about sports. So I just never was interested in it, never played any sports, just do not care, never did any. I'm a dedicated indoorsman. I just do not like doing physical activity for the most part. There's some things that I like. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I kind of got tired of all my friends in my peer group. They were all into, they were snowboarding or whatever, and they would talk about it, and they all had their various extreme sports. I never did anything. And so I just decided on a lark that I'm going to skydive. And I remember I picked skydiving because I was like, I don't think you have to do anything. I think you basically just obey the laws of physics and don't freak out, and it's fine. And so it takes very little effort. I mean, unless you're doing super advanced acrobatics, but if you're just falling out of an airplane, all you need to do is fall, don't freak out, and you're fine. And it takes basically, don't have to do anything. It's super safe because I looked at the actuarial tables. I was writing insurance software at the time, so I knew the stats. It's skydiving, it's much safer infinitely safer than skiing or playing football or something. So I'm it's a safe thing. It isn't bad for you. It's super easy. Just don't freak out. And it seems extreme, so I started skydiving. It was great, actually. It's super fun. The adrenaline rush you get is amazing. Doesn't take really any skill. I mean, you can certainly do things with it if you're skilled, but you don't have to be. And then people would in conversation, oh, what do you do? Oh, I skydive. Oh my God. And we got a lot of respect. And so I'm oh, this is the best, no effort required to how much cred you get for being extreme that you can get. And so to me, fasting feels the same thing. You don't actually do anything. Just like skydiving, you don't do anything. You just fall. In fasting, you just don't eat. And it's easy, and it doesn't really take much skill or willpower, honestly. I don't think it takes much willpower because it's pleasant, at least for me. I don't perceive it as a willpower exercise.
I would say, though, I think for a huge number of people, it would take a considerable amount of willpower that most people are not prepared to give.
I think it's the same willpower as it takes to jump out of an airplane for the first time. I think it's mostly psychological. It's you've been told and you really believe that this is a bad idea. And you just have to be you know what, brain, just going to do it anyway. And it turns out it's not that hard. So if you want to phrase that as willpower, sure. But I don't think it's a sustained willpower. People say, oh, when you feel good about it, it must be runner's high. I'm well, okay, I don't know. I've never had runner's high because I don't run. But my guess is in order to get runner's high, you have to like actually run and like extend a lot of energy, and it's like hard to get there. Like you have to like really work at it to have it. Fasting is not like that. Like once you realize that you don't do anything, then it's not hard. You don't do anything and it's not hard, and you get the benefit anyway. So it's like, to me, it's like in terms of effort to benefit, it's kind of amazing. It's like skydiving if you just want bragging rights.
What's interesting about what you're doing is clearly you've lost the weight, and have you pretty much got to where you want to be now?
Yeah, I'm within about 5 pounds, which so at this point I've had to shift to figuring out how I can keep fasting without losing more weight. So the reason I haven't
that was my question next. Yeah, how do you do that?
So I'm figuring it out. So I'm adjusting. You just have to adjust the interval. So I either eat more when I'm eating, or I have slightly fewer fasting days, or maybe I'll start eating a little bit more carbs. I don't know. So I gotta, like, at this point, the experimenting is I don't want to stop fasting because it feels great.
Because you enjoy the mental high.
Enjoy the fast, not just mental. Like it's physical. I have more energy. I work out more. My physical recovery rate is much faster. So I joined a boxing gym. I box. My performance is better after like day 6 of 0 calorie fasting than it is if I'm eating.
So you're becoming athletic and you're becoming more sporty.
Yeah, I mean, still from nothing to a very low level.
Boxing.
Didn't say I was good at it. Right. But yeah, I really enjoy it. So I don't want to stop doing it. I just need to figure out how to keep doing it without losing a lot more weight.
Has your attitude towards food changed those days that you do eat and what you eat in terms of the enjoyment factor?
Yeah. So what I eat hasn't changed too much because, and this is actually probably one of the reasons why it was easier for me than for a lot of people, is I think I was already fairly fat adapted. Like I wasn't eating, I had stopped eating like sugar and like most like processed carbs a while ago. So I was already mostly off bread, mostly off pizza, pasta for a few years. So I was eating, vegetables and meat and fat already, more or less. I think that would have been an extra big adjustment. So I was already like partially off glucose. So I haven't changed. That's still how I eat. My attitude has definitely changed. I think I enjoy food more. One of the most surprising things, and again, people think this must be torture, but it's not. It's fun. One of the most surprising things is I thought I would find it really hard to be around food and people eating when I was fasting. I thought that would be really hard. And it's really pleasant. Like I really enjoy being at a dinner and like sitting at the table and seeing the food and smelling it and passing food around and talking to people and just like not eating. It's really pleasant. I didn't think it would be. And in hindsight, you're like, well, why wouldn't it be? Like the look of the food is pleasant, and that's there, and the smell of the food is pleasant, and that's there. So like, why would two pleasant things add up to something unpleasant just because I wasn't eating it? So it's actually great. So I do that all the time. I go to meals, and I'm probably more social than I was before. I'm paying attention to the people. I'm talking about the food. I'm looking at it.
And you really have no problem with being the only person at the table eating absolutely nothing?
Not in San Francisco. It's fine.
Right. Back to that one. And your friends and your family, whoever you're eating with, they accept it?
Yeah. I mean, I explain it. So again, here, everyone's weird in some way. So you just say like, today, this is how I'm being weird. And everyone's like, oh, okay, great. And, you talk about it and it's fine. It's totally fine. I don't do that everywhere. So if I'm like in Tokyo or in Paris, and I'm, having a good dinner with, important investors at like a restaurant that they own, like that's not when I'm going to fast. I'm going to eat just because A, it's going to be a great experience. So why wouldn't I eat? And B, like, yeah, I don't need to be like, I don't want to make that the center of the conversation. So.
Do you find that people want to talk to you about it a lot?
Yeah. I mean, because it seems unusual. Certainly people who'd known me before want to talk about it just because it's dramatic. I look just dramatically different. Like people don't recognize me. So yeah. And then if people see me not eating, they want to talk about it. And I'm happy talking about it. I don't mind, obviously. I'm talking about it now. I don't necessarily seek that out, but sure.
Have you become an evangelist for it?
No. I just talk about my experiences when people ask, and definitely lots of people have started doing it after talking to me, which is not what I'm going for. But I don't go out of my way to evangelize. In fact, I've sort of resisted writing about it myself, just because I don't think that's not really what I'm interested in doing. But I have talked about it, a bit when people ask, and this kind of thing.
And I mean, I mentioned at the start that Silicon Valley, you're not the only one doing this, as you've implied as well.
No, this is the new thing.
Silicon Valley has really embraced not just fasting diets, but the longevity issue, which doesn't seem to be as uppermost in your mind as it is with some other people that there is clearly a longevity component to fasting. Potentially, the science is still evolving, but there is some good, solid evidence that it may help extend our lives or help us prevent diseases, cancer, diabetes, that kind of thing.
Maybe extend our lives, maybe extend the healthy portion of our lives. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research. That'd be great. I just don't I read about that stuff. I know lots of people in San Francisco that are fasting, lots of CEOs and VCs and that kind of stuff. And it kind of breaks down into two groups of people. There's like fat people, like I used to be, and skinny people. And like the skinny people are doing it for longevity, and the fat people are doing it to lose weight because it's a lot easier to measure. So I was very much in the category where I'm just seeing results every day. The longevity stuff it's harder to pin down. So I hope it's true. It may or may not be. I know the science isn't conclusive.
Do you think it's a shrewd investment, and purely putting your businessman's hat on, a shrewd investment for Silicon Valley organizations to get involved in the science of longevity?
Maybe. Silicon Valley's got lots of problems. The perception of, self-importance and privilege is a big one. And largely that perception exists because there's so much self-importance and privilege. So, focusing on living forever probably isn't helping with that. But having said that, if we can actually make a scalable version that helps people live longer, of course, that's the useful thing for the world. I'm not directly involved with it myself, but I know about a lot of the efforts. I talk to a lot of people. I generally think it's good. I'm not sure that there's any money at scale to be made from fasting, because that's the whole point, is you don't eat. That saves a lot of money. I'm donating all the money that I would have spent on food. I'm basically adding up, and at the end of the year, I'll donate it to a food charity, just because I don't like the perception that this is a privileged thing. I mean, it is, but I like the idea that the money that I would have spent eating, somebody else who actually needs the food could spend eating.
Although it's difficult, I think, really seriously to make the claim about privilege and fasting, because as you say, it just involves burying things down. It's free.
It's free. I mean, the constant medical tests aren't free. So I'm definitely, the stuff that I'm doing to measure myself, I'm spending a lot more, but I'm not doing that because of the fasting. I'm doing that because I'm a nerd and I just want all the data.
So what on an ongoing basis are you doing in terms of the tests?
So I just do, blood panels every few months, and then I do DEXA-Fit every few months, which does the full DEXA scans. That's the 3D body fat composition,
which is the most accurate you can get. Isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely. It's accurate. I don't know. There may be other more expensive things that are more accurate, but yeah. And then I also do the VO2 max, which is the physical performance, and the resting metabolic rate, the RMR tests. And then
and have you improved in all of those areas?
Yeah, all of them, significantly to a point where 3 years ago I was pre-diabetic. So I remember my doctor saying 3 years ago, look, you're lucky that there's nothing actually seriously wrong with you, but everything's going in the wrong direction. Within 5 years you'll have type 2 diabetes. It's just that's how it's going to go. And now all of that stuff is solidly in the green. It's not even borderline. It's 20 years younger. And in terms of weight, I looked, I was curious, when did I get fat? Because I don't remember. So I asked
You don't remember because you were so focused on work at the time?
Probably. Well, so I wasn't sure. So I asked my mom for just pictures. I'm can you just send me pictures you have of me at different ages? And so I put a timeline together, and there's pictures of me when I was 8 years old, and I was this really skinny kid. And 10 years old as a skinny kid, 15 I was skinny, 16 I was skinny, 17 I was skinny, 18 I'm fat. So got fat somewhere in high school. I didn't really notice it, but there's a very clear time where somewhere between 18 and 19, I started getting fat, and then I just got fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. So I haven't been this skinny since I was 17 years old. I'm 45 now. Now, obviously other things have, probably gone downhill, but for the most part, I'm not used to thinking of myself as a normal sized person. Sorry, I guess normal is the wrong word. I always thought of myself as very much an overweight person. And now, since I've been 17 years old, I do a lot of international travel. I go to Japan a lot. I go everywhere a lot. And it's been decades since I've been able to walk into a store in Europe or in Japan and buy clothes. That doesn't happen. I couldn't, at no point in Evernote could I walk into a store in Japan. I've been to Japan for 100 times. I love it there. Can't walk into a store and buy clothes, even though there's all sorts of things that looks cool, because there's just nothing that fits me. I have to go to I remember one time I actually buy a suit because my luggage got lost. I actually had to buy clothes in Japan. And that took a day, and I had to go to a special, place that had like clothes for basically sumo wrestlers.
Did that bother you emotionally?
I think so. I mean, I never made a big deal about it, but it definitely didn't feel good. And the idea that now like I can walk into a store and I can buy clothes, that's great. That hasn't happened since I was in high school, since before I had money to buy clothes with. So that's nice.
And I'm curious, and I think we all change in terms of our attitude towards health and our own personal longevity as we get older.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you now as you look ahead to your 50s and your 60s and your 70s?
Yeah.
Do you have certain personal aspirations, especially bearing in mind this experience, that you want to aim for?
Yeah, I want to do a pull-up, and I'm really close. I think I might get there next week. So I've never in my life done a pull-up or a chin-up. But I did my first chin-up about a month ago. So, like, I remember never, ever, ever being able to do a chin-up. I would try in school and never did it. Never came close.
And this is a basic chin-up without the aid of a rubber band or anything like that?
Yeah, just dead hang. Just, start from a hang and pull yourself up.
It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
I know lots of people who could do like 20 in a minute.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do any. And so I started working on it about 6 months ago. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start training. Like my goal is to do a chin up. Did my first chin up of my life about 4 or 6 weeks ago. Still couldn't do a pull up, but I'm close. I'm like 90% to being able to do a pull up. So I think in 2 weeks I'll like actually do my first pull up. I don't have longer term plans than that, but for the next 2 weeks I have a goal.
So unlike many people in this city, and you kind of refer to them, who have absolute definite goals about their own, I want to get to 100, I want to get to 110 or 20 because we think it's possible. Those sorts of ideas don't.
No, I don't really think about. I get bored thinking about myself for too much. Like I much prefer to think about other things in the world that I'm working on. So no, I have plenty of goals for like what I want this company to accomplish, the impact that I'd like to have in the world. I don't have any like specific life goals for myself. I would like to live as long as possible, as long as I'm healthy. That seems great. I definitely feel much better about my health at this point than before. My mood is much better. Honestly, probably the biggest impact is mood. I'm just like, I won't necessarily say happier. I mean, I am happier, but really what happens is like I feel much more resilient. Like in the past, something bad would happen, some unpleasant thing, at work or personally or whatever, and I would be like sad or angry for like, it would affect me for like weeks. And now like something just as serious happens, and it's like, yeah, I get angry or I get sad for like 30 seconds. And then like 30 seconds later, I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like it's still like, it's fine. I never had that before. I never had that sort of like fast bounce back. And I think that maybe more than anything in like business is like what you need, is to just not dwell on negative things for too much. So I'm happy about that. And I think that's going to have a big impact in the long term.
Have people close to you, friends, family, noticed that and mentioned it to you that you've changed in terms of interacting with you?
Well, people that are close to me probably notice the physical changes much more. And so those probably dwarf like other stuff.
Actually, one physical, I think I mentioned it to start with. You no longer have a beard.
Yeah,
which you did for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I had a beard.
What prompted that?
Well, I only had a beard because I had like 3 chins, and so it was like I had a goatee for 25 years because I just looked terrible without it, and so I remember like shaving it once when I was like 22 and being like, that's not good.
Was there an element as a younger man of wanting to look older, as some people do? And then as you get older, I'm curious, do you want, all of a sudden you want to look younger?
Yeah, that's interesting. Probably because I was always like, when I was young, I was always like the youngest to do X. So, like the youngest person in the company. And probably when I was starting out, I was trying to look older. But also like at that point I was already really overweight. So I was also just trying to like look better. And I just think I looked better with a goatee, which I may have been totally wrong. I look at old pictures of myself and I'm like, wow, that was just not a good look. But certainly by the time I was in my 20s, like I would have shaved had I thought that I could have pulled it off. And so it took a while for me to actually be able to do that.
Just coming full circle back to All Turtles, which we started talking about. How did you get the name? What does it mean?
It's a reference to Turtles All the Way Down, which is a Bertrand Russell story where, Bertrand Russell is giving a lecture about the structure of the Earth and the solar system and the universe. And after he's done, it's apocryphal. Everyone applauds, but this one old lady gets up. Old lady because every every traditional story is horribly misogynist. So the classic version is one old lady gets up and says everything you said is wrong because everyone knows that the earth is actually flat and it's resting on the back of a giant turtle. And he says, oh, but if that's true, madam, then what's the turtle resting on? And she says, oh, you're very clever, but you won't trap me that way. Everyone knows it's turtles all the way down. So that's the idea. It's turtles all the way down. You're always standing on the shoulders of the people who have built things before you, and you're supporting the generation of entrepreneurs that come after you.
And you said a second or so ago, you don't really have aspirations in terms of your own achievements in the future, but you do perhaps globally and professionally and with this company. What is the vision there?
I think the biggest problem in the world is wasted potential. I think that there are many brilliant people who don't get to express their brilliance in a way that actually impacts the world. And I think that Silicon Valley style of innovation, like basically the startup and venture capital sort of model, is really, really good at getting certain types of brilliant people in certain places, namely San Francisco, to have an impact on the world, but it just doesn't work for anyone else. And so I want to build a platform or a platformer platform. I want it to be platforms all the way down where the most brilliant people everywhere in the world of every type get to express their brilliance in a way that makes products that affects the world. So that's the goal, is to have 100 times more meaningful, important products in the world being made by people who don't usually get to make them right now.
And how do people get access to this platform?
I don't know yet. So we're starting with 11 companies here. And those are all just people that I've known for a while and worked with. And now we're opening in Tokyo and Paris soon, the next few months. And then we'll have to have some sort of way for people to apply and get in. And we're just figuring all that stuff out as we go. So we're building the structure as we go. But the idea is people that are in love with a particular problem, that see a hole in the world in the shape of their idea and want to spend the rest of their lives like solving an important problem and have some plausible ideas about how to do it. I want to work with those people and make those things happen.
And a big part of this is the personal challenge. You've had tremendous amount of success with Evernote, and you've moved on. And do you want to try to recreate that level of success?
Well, I definitely think this should be much bigger than Evernote ever got to. Evernote, we had very high ambitions for, and I think it's a great company. I think it's going to continue to impact the world in a good way and have a very good outcome. But that's, Evernote is one product or one family of products. I really think this is a way to build, the next 10,000 really great products. So hopefully a lot bigger than Evernote.
And is there a great product or two or three that comes to mind that you really feel passionately about?
Well, there's many, but our idea, the whole idea here is we want to work on important products, and we don't need to ask the question of like, could each one be a $10 billion company? That filter of only working on things that could be really huge, that's the Silicon Valley filter that I think causes a lot of problems. So we want to build things that are important, and maybe they're $10 billion, and maybe they're $100 million, or maybe they're $5 million. Like that shouldn't really matter. We should find a way to build things at scale that solve important problems. And I think we have a model that lets us do that.
Well, Phil, I wish you all the best with this venture.
Thank you.
And with the fasting, we'll watch with interest to see what happens with that. And I'm still, I think like so many people, still really trying to figure out fasting in terms of the best regime. I guess we're all different, and the same thing isn't always going to work for each of us.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out too. The one thing I've learned for myself, again, purely personal subjective experience, is when I'm not eating, the easiest thing to do is just to not eat. And as soon as I eat anything, it becomes much harder. So anything that involves eating a little bit of calories a day for me is like much harder to pull off than just going for 3, 5, 8 days of nothing and then eating normally. So that's kind of what I'm drawn to, is when I'm fasting, I don't eat. And when I'm eating, I eat. And there's no in between. The pure version is much easier for me. But I totally understand that it may not be so for anyone else.
Fascinating. Phil Libin, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And that is it for this episode. A quick reminder, there are lots of ways to listen to the podcast, as well as our website, llama-podcast.com. Tune in, Google Play Music. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Llama Podcast. From San Francisco, many thanks for listening.